everyone. Today I'm here with Brianne Donaldson. Brianne is assistant professor and the holder of the Sri Parshvanath Presidential Chair in Jain Studies here at UCI. So Brianne is going to show us today how to make a Jain-friendly menu, or at least recipes. She's going to show us the spring rolls with peanut sauce and also a Jain-friendly chocolate mousse. So, Brianne, take it away.
Great, thank you, Annalisa, and hi everyone out there. I'm going to actually go in reverse today, and I'm going to start with dessert first so that it can sit in the fridge for a little bit. The two dishes I'm going to make actually require no cooking, so they're really excellent for hot summer days, and we'll get into it. So the first thing I want to do is make a tofu chocolate mousse. Mm-hmm. It involves very few ingredients, so I'll just show you down here that you need silken tofu, and this is shelf stable, so you don't find it in the refrigerator section. You usually find it in the Asian section. And I just am going to put that into the food processor, which is one of my very best friends in the kitchen. And then I'm using just basic dark cocoa powder, and I'm going to put in a 1/4 cup of this. And then it often also calls for, or the recipe that I use to make it so easy is to use maple syrup plus vanilla, but I actually have maple syrup with vanilla in it, so I even can cut out one ingredient there. And I put in a 1/4 cup of that. I got that sneaky little vanilla bean. And that's pretty much the end of it. I'm going to run this just for a second. Do you ever use a food processor, Annalisa?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I love using it. It sort of does all the work for me. So this runs for about, just a minute until all of it's smoothed out. And then I'm going to put it into dishes and stick it in the fridge.
So as you do that, explain to the people who are watching this video why you are choosing tofu rather than dairy products, and the kind of precepts that go together with Jainism.
Well, so Jainism is an ancient tradition rooted in India, although now Jains live all over the world, including in Southern California, which is why they've helped to support this position at UCI. While we talk, I'm just going to show
Wow. It has a wonderful texture.
Yeah, it's really wonderful. And you can also use, if you have a excess of avocados, you can use about the same amount of fresh avocados, and it does the same exact thing. It makes it really nice and smooth with the same exact ingredients. So I'm going to just pour that into these dishes. So when we think about Jain food, or what makes this Jain friendly, I guess there's a few different reasons. The first is that in the Jain worldview, there is a sense that every living being has a core life force that's called a jiv. And this is for you and me and for all our watchers and for every living existent thing. So that includes plants, animals, birds, fish, microorganisms. And that really informs the way the Jains eat. I'll say another word about that in a minute, but just to show you, like, I'm going to go ahead and stick these in the fridge. So dessert is done, and it is on its way, and we can move on to spring rolls. And so if Jains see that everything has a core jiv, in a sense that means that all living beings are equal. But when we look around us in the world, we also see that there's a great deal of difference and variation. And so the way that Jains account for this is by ascribing 1 to 5 senses to the different living beings. And it sort of brings me to the spring rolls, I guess, because it helps to understand why we're going to make the spring rolls the way we are. So let me grab those items. So for spring rolls, we're going to be using a variety of different plants here. In that Jain taxonomy of life, single-sensed beings include plants as well as beings that are in earth, air, fire, water, and wind, and microorganisms. Then you have second sense, third, fourth, and fifth sense. And those, as we move up, they include different kinds of mollusks and worms and insects. And as we get to the fifth sense, that includes all humans, birds, mammals, fish. And so Jains generally try to eat one-sense beings only and avoid five-sense beings. Really, it's the hallmark of Jainism is not to eat animals and to eat one-sense plants. And it's also a little bit more interesting than that even, but let me do one step and then we can come back to talking about the vegetables that we're choosing today. So for this, spring rolls are extremely easy to make. They're one of my very favorite things. And I'm gonna use, these are just basic rice noodles you can get. They're the really skinny kind. And so any sort of package will do. I just put them into a big bowl. And I get hot water from that you've just heated on the stove, or this is my kettle. And you just pour it over them, and they're gonna sit for about 2 minutes. So you don't even really have to cook, they just do their own thing. You just don't wanna forget them. They get mushy, then you've got a problem. I'm also going to, before we make the spring rolls themselves, why those noodles set up, I'm gonna do a peanut sauce. Mm-hmm. In addition to eating one-sense plants, Jains also typically avoid foods that grow underneath the ground. So that'd be carrots, garlic, onions, potatoes. Peanuts are a peculiar exception for some reason because they have a shell. But the sense is that in addition to being a plant that's under the ground and that requires you to uproot the whole plant, thus disturbing more microorganisms. Those roots are also full of other one-sense beings. They're called nagods, and they have to live on a host environment, like within the skin of plants or animals, and also within roots. And so when we look at our food today, we're not having any carrots or anything like that. I've chosen to use all terrestrial vegetables, which would be cucumbers, red cabbage, which is one of my very favorite things. These are just greens that I had in the fridge, and you could use anything like this. I'm going to use avocado. And I had a mint plant, so mint is a wonderful herb. You could also use basil if you have that growing. And then I picked up some cilantro. So those are our items. For the peanut sauce, this is an easy recipe. I think of it as 3-3-3. It is 3 tablespoons of peanut butter, and I would say chunky. It's the right answer, but everyone can have their own choice. I'm going to use just basic soy sauce. And as I'm using the soy sauce, I'm thinking that this is also a recipe that doesn't have any, it's gluten-free. Both the dessert and the spring rolls are gluten-free, so they're good for that as well. I'm using a chili paste, and this chili paste doesn't have any garlic. It's just something that I got at the local 99-cent store. Typically, they would have a lot of garlic in it, but because this is Jain-friendly, I'm just using straight chili. I'm going to use just, you can just do this to your taste. I like it a little spicy, so I'm going to use about 3 teaspoons. And then you need some water, so I'm going to grab that real quick. I'm going to quickly drain these little noodles out, and so they don't get too soggy, and I'll be right back. You need to rinse these off with cold water so that they cool down a little bit. And then I'm just going to go back to stirring this peanut sauce.
Perfect.
So Annalisa, what do you think would be helpful for other viewers to know about Jainism in addition to their diet of 1 sense plants.
Well, I guess many will be curious about Jainism itself. It's often, I would say, conflated with Buddhism. So maybe you want to say something about that?
In a sense, there's a good reason to conflate Buddhism and Jainism because they're really close cousins. They both emerge around the same time in ancient India, and they're both understood, like what we call Buddhism or what we call Jainism, they emerge out of this indigenous communities known as shramanas or strivers. These are often the people, they're characterized by not ascribing to the Vedas. You can think of the Vedas as associated with contemporary Hinduisms. And they often lived away from society. They had a sense that sacrifice, especially sacrifice of animals, wasn't acceptable, and that anyone could be a striver. There didn't have to be a hierarchy. There wasn't a kind of gatekeeper recitation. And so Buddhism and Jainism both really emerge out of this. The Mahavir, who's the 24th teacher in Jainism, is older contemporary of the Buddha, and they reference each other in their own texts and in others, and so we know that they overlapped at least during their lifetimes, and their ideas often came into sometimes collaboration and sometimes conflict. All right, we've got peanut sauce, and I'm going to drain noodles, and then we are going to be ready to roll. So this is what they look like when they're done. And one thing I really love about this is if it's a really great activity for a group. If you've got children or if you've got friends over, you can see how I just sort of cut everything and line it up. And it's a really nice way for everyone to get involved. And I mean, you can certainly roll roughly, but you can't really go too far wrong. So big hands, little hands, everyone can get in on it. These are just basic spring roll rice wrappers. Rice is also a terrestrial grain that's very central to Jain eating. They look like this, and they also are very easy to deal with. I'm going to use a clear dish just so you can kind of see what it looks like. I put a little warm water in the bottom. It doesn't need to be hot, just warm to the touch is fine. And you just take one and you drop it in. Once you have a little practice, you could use a sheet pan and do 2 or 3 at a time. But just for our sake, I'm going to just do one. Once you get the hang of it, you can use a larger vessel, or if you've got help, you can do it that way as well. But you're looking for it just to curl up a little bit. Otherwise, if it gets too soft, it becomes unmanageable. While that sits, I'm going to just take my avocado. My little trick is I put the knife in and twist. That pulls out my pit.
Wonderful.
I'm just going to slice this through. Ooh, this is just starting to curl up. Oops.
Yes.
And you can see how it got all like kind of smushy, but that's fine. You can just unroll it again, kind of like cling film.
Yes.
Lay it down like this. Another one of my avocado tricks, I just use a spoon and I kind of go underneath the skin and just pull all those slices out. And so now they're ready to be dealt with. So we're ready to roll. I have my wrapper here. I'm going to take some noodles. When you first start, you kind of want to be a little bit more modest with your noodles so that you don't overfill. And these are really small wrappers. You can get larger ones, but these are what they had. And so I just, you just adjust and make smaller rolls, but the bigger ones, you can almost make a whole lunch out of it. Now I'm going to put this down just a little so you can see. I'll take red cabbage, mint, and I say the more the merrier with herbs, cilantro, a little bit of lettuce, a couple pieces of cucumber. And one thing about cucumber, if you're using just regular size cucumbers, you want to just use your finger and kind of pull those seeds out a little bit so that you don't have wet rolls. If you're using Persian cucumbers or something like that, it's you don't have to do that step. Avocado goes in, and then you're confronted with the daunting task of rolling. So what I suggest is when you lay this in, you can kind of see how the roll is down here, and I've put everything more to one side, because as you pull up, you want to just kind of smoosh it in toward you, and then start to do the roll and just tuck everything in. Mm-hmm. Some people like to tie the ends in. Yes. I myself think, like, why? Why bother? Just leave them open. And you can see here, I have like a really beautiful roll. Beautiful. And we'll just do one more, I think, for... Yes. And make sure. We want to learn. We need to pick up the skill of rolling. It's a very... there's always going to be some casualties, but even casualties are delicious. Another thing about this is that everything that you can see here that I'm going to put into a spring roll also could be placed into a bowl, and it's just called a vermicelli bowl. You basically just put in the noodles, you put all the vegetables, you can put as much greens and lettuce as you want, and put some peanut sauce or chili sauce or whatever on it, mix it up, and it's also totally delicious. So if you have enough leftovers the next day, you can just have vermicelli bowls. So did you have difficulties finding the ingredients during COVID? Was there something that was difficult to find for you and to prepare Jain-friendly dishes? Well, I'm not a practicing Jain, a Jain scholar, but I certainly have been informed by Jain ethics. I grew up in the Midwest, so agriculture was very much a part of life there, and so I think my route to thinking about food was slightly different. But when I encountered Jainism at a community college, it was the first sort of philosophical worldview that really had a robust understanding of the ethical relationship of plants, people, animals, and food. That food was a really important expression of one's world vision. And so there was a sort of marriage there that even though I started a different route when I encountered Jainism, there was something there of interest beyond just kind of pure academic curiosity. So, I don't always eat purely Jain in the sense that sometimes I have root vegetables or garlic or onions or things like this, but I have lived toward a plant-based life for about 20 years. And I guess without dairy and other animal products for, I guess, about maybe 14 of those. So in that sense, it's pretty, I just learned as you went. It's kind of like learning a little bit of a new language. And for this particular recipe, all of these things are very easy to find. And the only thing that might be a little bit unfamiliar to people is that tofu that you have to get in the shelf stable for the mousse. But otherwise, I mean, these are all things that you can get at any farmer's market and just basic
yes.
shop. I'm gonna just put this here. And of course, now this wouldn't be a typical Indian Jain food, but among Jains who live in diaspora or live in other countries, they have sort of adapted Jain eating into all kinds of cuisines. So Mexican, Spanish cuisine, Thai, and different kinds of Asian cuisine. And so if I were going to have Jains for guests, I would be very happy to serve this. And I think, and for myself, I would be very happy to have this. So there's nothing that I feel like is there's not a lot, not a lot that would have been added with, say, a potato, right, into this. Yeah. And I think that one thing about this is that when you've got like a roll that's full of all these veggies, it also has the avocado in it. You could put tofu or cashews or other kinds of nuts, and then you have no excuse not to really go wild with peanut sauce, because then you can kind of really make the whole thing a complete protein, fat, delicious greens meal.
Yeah, I think one thing that's it's interesting here is how you substitute for animal proteins, and I think that it would be important, even if you don't turn into a Jain or not even a vegetarian or vegan, but to know more about the use of non-animal proteins, because definitely there is overconsumption anyway of that kind of proteins in our Western society, I think. So it's all welcome and a very good learning experience for all of us, I think.
Well, and I think it's a great time to try it over the summer. I mean, pandemic notwithstanding, when there are a lot of issues coming out of with the U.S. meat supply, I think it's a great opportunity to think about all that goes into that industry, and not just the cost to animals, but to many beings and to land. And so as we have a pause sort of put upon us, then I think it's a great opportunity to just explore other options. And one thing nice about the summer is that this is something that we don't actually have to cook. So you can, in a certain way, it's even easier to make. It's not as though one has to even substitute for this particular recipe, but that you can leave it out and explore sort of all the seasonal vegetables that you have at your local market, whatever's in your herb garden, whatever you have sitting in the back of the fridge that you thought, what am I going to, I was supposed to use that last week. Roll is a wonderful vehicle for just about everything. I have a friend who used some like plant-based meat products. I often will stick, like I said, tofu or peanuts, cashews, anything like this. And so it's just a really great vehicle for whatever needs to be used up. And it's a fun activity. It's a way to kind of get your hands dirty. And I always think, one great thing I learned about being in India is that there is this invitation to be close to all the things that make us human, and using our hands to eat is one of those things, sort of to have a different relationship with our food, both philosophically and tactily. So if I were going to serve this, I would probably load this tray up a lot more than this, and I might even have a much bigger platter. We would really want to have this sense of abundance, spring rolls for everyone.
Yes.
I would put my peanut sauce right on there and kind of stack this around. And not to be outdone, let me go grab our chocolate mousse.
Absolutely.
So this is the chocolate mousse, and if I were doing this, I would just have whatever fresh or frozen fruit that I have around and stick that on. I also like to have other things on. I was feeling very nostalgic today. I was cutting these strawberries, like this, and I remember I was having a memory of my grandmother trying to show me how to have a glass. and I'm not sure she would be too impressed with this, but nevertheless. For me, I really like to I always have nuts on hand. I guess as someone who eats like a plant-based diet, nuts are a pretty important part of my life. I make all kinds of things with them. Make different spreads and all sorts of things. But these are walnuts, and so I'm going to add those into the mousse. One thing about nuts is that they can, you don't just eat them by themselves. They go into, I can make like a crumble, kind of like a taco meat out of this without having to do any sort of heating. And so all these things are really nice for plant-based eating. And I also picked up some coconut, so I'm going to add some of that here as well. So our finished product is going to be some chocolate mousse and spring rolls.
And you pour the peanut sauce on top of the spring rolls when you heat them, or you dip the roll inside the sauce?
Well, there's a couple ways. So if I was going to have friends over, I would probably have some little bowls and then pour some into each individual bowl so that you can just dive in. If it's just me by myself, if you were to watch me, if someone were to walk by and see me through the window, they'd see me just sort of pouring it on and eating it right now. Dish. I can't really. Sometimes I don't even bother to sit down. I just think I have to get right into it. So yeah, if you've got friends, I guess the social distancing way to do it is to put it into each little dishes so everyone can just go kind of pull out of the communal peanut sauce bowl and into their own and do it however they want. Some people like to dip. Some people like to pour on. You also, if you want to be impressive, you can kind of cut these in half. But I think with the small ones, it's not really worth it. If you use the larger ones, to cut them is, makes a little more sense, because then it's almost like you have too many burritos. But for these, I think they're manageable. They're kid-sized, people-sized.
Wonderful. So, Brianne, thank you so much for showing us these Jain-friendly dishes. And for all of you who have been watching this video, goodbye and enjoy.
Thank you. And as the Jains say, Jai Jinendra, or victory to the Jinnah in you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Brianne.
Yeah. Bye-bye.